I packed my bags, moved across the world on my own. I had zero idea what I was doing, yet it turned out to be the best decision ever. Welcome back, love. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my story of how I've moved abroad, not just once, but multiple times, 8 to be exact, and how I've learned to trust myself in the process. If you have been feeling anxious, disconnected, overwhelmed, burnt out, and you know you need to make a change. Maybe you've been dreaming about moving abroad or changing jobs or finding your purpose. Maybe you just know that something needs to be different, but you have no idea even what that is yet. This video is for you. First of all, I want to take you back all the way to the beginning. When I grew up, I had such an adventurous soul. It was just born in me. I know to this day, my grandfather and my family will say things like, we had to keep an eye on you at all times because just in the blink of an eye, you would be across the park talking to these, other kids or jumping on this, and it was so hard to keep track of you. And I laugh because that is something that was just ingrained in me. It's a part of who I am, and it's a common thread that has just stayed through. And I mention it because these things that come naturally to us as children, that feel very natural, they are a part of us. And no matter what we do, how much experience we get, how much we get older, that doesn't go away. It's part of your soul. And so when we talk about trusting ourselves more, we can look back at those things that were so natural to us as kids when we felt very free, very ourselves, because those are the things that are still in you now, and you just have to reconnect back to it. And I remember as I grew up, I had just this deep curiosity of getting to know the world, of traveling, getting to know different people, having different experiences. And I would write in my diaries, like, dear diary, like, I'm so excited. I want to live in Europe. I want to travel here and there and see this and that. And there was just this innate desire to go abroad, even though it didn't make any sense. There was no real logic behind it. Those things you can trust. Your intuition does not always make sense. Actually, a lot of the times it really doesn't. But your body knows. Now, the first time I had moved abroad, it was not abroad per se, but it was across states. So this was the first time I had moved on my own into something I completely didn't know anything about. It was time to apply for universities, and all of my friends growing up in Chicago, we were all applying to universities in Chicago. And I remember during the application process, there was something that felt like it was heavy during it. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel curious about it. It was just, you're going through the motions and you're doing what everyone else is doing. Pay attention to that, by the way, when you're doing that and how you feel. When I noticed this feeling, I remember I sat with myself, and I was a big journaler, a big writer at that time it was just called writing in your diary. And I had this feeling then of, what if I went further? What if I didn't stay even in the state that I grew up in? And I remember within that week, a friend of mine mentioned that her cousin is applying to university out of state. And she was telling me about it, and something sparked in me. So I went home, I looked it up, and immediately then I applied for a visit, and I think within the next 2 weeks, my mom and I were doing a fun, spontaneous 7-hour trip to go visit the university. I knew no one there. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was far away from my family. But something felt right, and I trusted myself, and I went for it. And it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. I remember I made the decision, it felt good, But then when it came time to actually move, I was packing my bags and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually leaving everything I know. This is so strange. I had grown up in Chicago. I had grown up in a bubble, and it was wonderful. But at the same time, I always had this inkling of there has to be something else out there. I felt like sometimes like I was a bit like the oddball out. Like I was always curious of what else was out there. I had different thoughts, different ways of seeing things. And in my surroundings, that felt quite like I was really limited. And so when it came time to leave, it was like this moment like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually doing it. And with that can come fear and doubt and uncertainty if I made the right decision or if I'm just doing something crazy. But here's how I knew that it was the right thing. My mind, even though my mind had all these thoughts that were more anxious, my body felt very calm. And in my heart, I felt excited. I felt like an openness. And I remember when I moved, and my family dropped me off and unpacked me, and then they left. It was such a surreal feeling, like I am here on my own. I did it. And I remember that built so much confidence in me of, okay, I can see and I can feel a desire of mine and I can actually go for it, even if I don't have a direct plan and everything figured out. I felt actually like I had no idea what I was doing, but I was just taking the next step and trusting that. And as I was there, it was such a beautiful experience because I got to know a world so outside of what I knew. It was so different. I met people who thought differently, who saw things differently, who grew up differently. And I remember, and this might sound silly, but it was like I didn't know that people had all these different experiences because I only grew up around a certain way of thinking, a certain way of being, which isn't good or bad. It's just, it's one way. And then there were all these other ways that I was learning, and it just opened my eyes and it opened my mind to seeing I can live differently. I can do things differently. I can choose how I want to set things up and what I want to create in my life. And that was such a life-changing experience to have that, to see that possibility. And so if you ever feel like you're stuck in an environment that you don't fit into, that you just feel, and it's not that anyone around you in the environment is good or bad, it just might not be the right fit for you. You can trust that. There's an inner knowing that knows there's something better out there for you. And then the second time I had moved was in my last semester there. I had saw a poster about moving abroad. And I saw it and I was like, oh, like it really excited me to do a semester abroad. And again, I didn't have a plan, but I went to the abroad office, the study abroad office, and I spoke with them. And I remember that at the time, they were so happy that I was genuinely interested because they had to convince students to study abroad. And I was like, what? How? Like, this is such an amazing opportunity. But most people just wanted to stay in the bubble of what they knew, and they didn't want to leave so far. Now, that was a much more challenging change because I had moved abroad across the world to France at that time on my own. Actually, not completely on my own. A friend of mine at the time came with me, and she was supposed to come for 2 weeks. And I thought that was really helpful because it would really help me to transition. We got there, we had spent our first days in Paris. It was such a beautiful experience. And then we went to the town where I would be doing my semester abroad. This town was quite in the middle of nowhere. People did not speak English. They were not very nice to people who didn't speak French. And it was a shock for the both of us. I remember we arrived and I had settled into the apartment I had, and it just felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. I knew no one, and we both felt scared. And it was within 2 days that she had quite a big shock culturally that she felt so uncomfortable that she called her parents to go home. So she left me there. And then I was there on my own. And I share this because change is not always comfortable. That wasn't something that felt easy. But I do want to share the things that I did at the time that helped me through that transition. At first, I spent the first 2 weeks on Skype with my family every single night. And basically, I was wrapped up in a big blanket being like, I don't want to be here. This was such a mistake. Why did I do this? I should have just stayed at home. There was so much regret coming in. And what I want to say about this is kind of like buyer's remorse when you make a sale. When you purchase something, you're on the other side of the sale. Have you ever had an experience where you buy something and maybe it's more expensive and afterwards you're like, oh my gosh, like your mind gets flooded with all of these thoughts that maybe it wasn't the good decision. You get all anxious and stressed. Just because you have that doesn't mean it's true. The same way that when I had made that decision, I moved abroad and those first 2 weeks were like really challenging and those thoughts started to come in. Those are our thoughts, but they're not the truth. And the truth is that at the time I had made what I call now a quantum leap. I had made a big change and I had changed the way that I made decisions. I had made a bigger leap than I'd ever done. And whenever we make a big change, different than what we've done before, the aftermath of that is that we may start to feel more anxious, more down, more regret, more, oh no, that buyer's remorse. Did I do the right thing? But that doesn't mean it's true. And if you have this after you've made a big change, pause and tune into your body. What helped me at that time is I had to do something different. The body knew that I had done the right thing, but my mind was filled with fear. When you stay stuck in fear, like I was doing, I was just staying every night on Skype with my family, that fear starts to grow. It starts to perpetuate. We cannot give that energy. And so what we have to do in that time is to really nurture ourselves, be really kind and compassionate to ourselves throughout those transitions. I have helped so many friends, clients to this day through these kind of transitions, whether it's a move, it's a job change, it's a transition through companies. And this kind of regret moment always comes up. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just because you are on an edge of expanding into a bigger side of yourself. You are quantum leaping to a bigger version of yourself. And sometimes the inner self gets a little bit scared. And she's like, oh my God, what did I do? Is this crazy? Always take a pause there and don't give in to those immediate feelings, because they are just trying to get used to and accumulate to this new thing. What actually helped in this moment, and what I can't recommend enough, is to do something different. You have to get outside. So at that time, I remember I didn't feel like it, I didn't want to, but I had to force myself to start learning French, A, and B, going outside. I was in France, going to see the different places, speak to different people, get to know who is there and talk to people. Even though we couldn't always communicate, I would try with my broken French, but I would put myself out there. I would start to go to cafes on my own, restaurants on my own, speak to the staff in whichever way I could. There was no Google Translate on the phone at that time. I did not have that. But to, really throw myself in those uncomfortable situations. When we feel discomfort and resistance to something, instead of leaning back in those places are growth. And when you pour yourself into them, all of a sudden, you start to change the brain patterns in your mind to associate the things that are not comfortable with actual growth and with a good positive feeling, a good positive outcome. And I noticed that the more I did this, the more I stopped when I felt down, staying in my head, staying in my, my apartment, thinking, overanalyzing, the more I stopped doing that and the more I got out into the world and put myself in the uncomfortable, the more happier I became, the more fulfilled I became, and the more I actually started to love living abroad. I ended up making new friends and traveling to different places, and that opened up a whole new world to me. And it was funny because I didn't plan it, but I ended up living then in Europe for almost a decade after. I didn't return back to the States. I had traveled around different countries, ended up living and moving to different countries. And I'm not going to go through all the 8 today. If you want to know more about those, you can leave a comment below and maybe I'll make a second series. But I had the opportunity to live in Europe. I ended up moving to the Middle East, to Dubai as well, and to another part in Europe. And then just all of the things that I had dreamed of were coming true. But it had to start with trusting myself to take those big leaps and open myself to the discomfort that sometimes came with it. That saying is so true. On the other side of discomfort, on the other side of fear, is your freedom. And that is exactly what I felt in these situations. I remember the more that I started to trust myself, and the trusting of myself came from listening into what my heart really wanted, what felt good, what lit me up versus what didn't. The more I did that, the more I felt closer to myself. And honestly, I can show you a picture from when I lived in the States, in Chicago, to then when I lived in Europe, to even now, and it's like completely different people. First of all, I reversed aging, so I look younger now than I did then, and I completely believe that is because when we are following our soul's purpose, when we are really trusting ourselves, we become younger because our cells regenerate differently. We are vibrating on a more positive frequency, and the better that we feel, the more youthful our skin becomes, the more of a glow we have, the more attractive we become. We start to magnetize all these different experiences and opportunities to us, and that helps us glow from the inside out. That's from another topic, but I love talking about that as well. But through all the places that I've moved, through all the countries I've been in, the biggest thing that I've learned is that you have to do it. You have to follow your heart. There is no other choice. We forget because we sometimes grow up in a certain way of being, in a certain bubble, a certain way of thinking. We forget how big this world is. We forget that so many different people are living such different lives, and that means that you have the chance to choose how you want to live your life. You don't have to do things exactly how they've always been done. No, where did you learn that from? And is it true for you? The thing that we often forget is that we are really here for a limited time. It's not forever. And your soul came here to experience something real, something true to yourself. And that truth is not living in burnout, anxiety, or overwhelm, or running from one thing to the next stressed. No, you are here to live in fulfillment, in joy, in peace, and in connection with yourself. That's what you were born here to do. You wouldn't be put on this earth otherwise. And it's not for a reason, or it is for a reason. It's not by accident that you're here. And the way that I have navigated moving abroad through all of its ups and downs, every time has gotten easier, but still, to be honest, it does come with a level of uncertainty. It comes with a level of loneliness when you move to a new place and you don't know anyone and you don't know the culture, you don't sometimes speak the language. This is all new. But if it's true to you, if it's something that you want to do, it's worth it. Because the thing is that those feelings of discomfort, those feelings of loneliness, those feelings of if you're making a change and you get rejected by something, those are only temporary. They're only temporary. But what's real, what's long-term, is you choosing yourself. You prioritizing the inner knowing, the intuition that is calling you. This is something that is going to affect your life. It's not just short term. So choose what is going to bring you the most long-term effects that gets you closer to the vision that you want to be at. So how did I learn to actually trust myself through all these processes? First of all, I want to share with you that in the beginning, when I was first making these kind of moves, I didn't really trust myself. I didn't know what it was to trust myself because I had grown up being told, do this, do that, live like this. This is what's going to lead you to happiness. This is what's going to lead you to success. Only to then climb all those ladders that I was told to realize, okay, I'm not feeling the success. I'm not feeling the happiness, even though on the outside it looks like so perfect and amazing and like I've reached it. But on the inside, something was off. And when that happens, then we start to lose trust in ourselves because we're kind of confused, like, well, we were told that this would bring us all these things, but why isn't it happening? And that's because we gave away our trust to someone else a long time ago. And when we do that, and that's usually not happening consciously, it's happening, sometimes very, very young, then learning to trust ourselves, especially as women, this is a journey. And my journey, it came through moving abroad. Every time that I went, I strengthened this muscle. I strengthened knowing the feeling between my body and my mind. And especially then when I started to study mindfulness and yoga and like regulating your body and all of the things around healing that I've studied for over a decade now, I started to learn how the mind is so different from the body. So even if you have an inner calling, you have something that just keeps coming back to the mind, keeps calling you. It's not by accident. These are seeds that are being planted into you because they're calling you to follow it. It's not just random. That's why person A likes art and person B likes math. Your souls are meant for those things and you're meant to follow them. And the more you ignore them, the more you get further away from yourself, further from feeling fulfilled and balanced and full of joy. So if there is something that's calling you, you can listen to it. And so how can you really start to trust yourself? From everything I've learned, the first step is that self-awareness of knowing that something is off. You may be in a place that you know something is off, but think, okay, I know something is off, but I'm not making the change. First of all, I want to give you a big hug, but also I just want to congratulate you because the fact that you have the awareness that something is off, not everyone has this. And the fact that you know that something is off, you can feel it, that means that something else is also coming on the other side, which is the opportunity for change. And if you don't know, if you don't see, then that would be like you, for instance, you seeing, you knowing that is a sign from your soul that you're ready for a change, because otherwise you would just be asleep. And I don't mean asleep in bed, but asleep during the day. You would just be not seeing these things, but you're seeing them for a reason. From there, it's so important to learn how to connect to your body and take time for self-reflection. Oftentimes, we're just so busy in our day that we don't pause and actually reflect, why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I doing it for? And what is my bigger vision in life? What is it that I want to create here? If we don't pause and ask ourselves these things, we're just on a hamster wheel going, going, going. And when you pause and ask yourself these things, you may start to realize that you have certain beliefs that you've been carrying certain ways of doing things that are actually not you. They're maybe passed down from your family or through something you've learned. It doesn't have to be good or bad, but it just is not you. So the more we can self-reflect and have those pauses, the more you can come back to, okay, actually creating consciously the life that you are meant for. And off of that, learning how to connect with your body. One of the biggest things I've learned through self-trust is knowing the cues in my own body of what is good, what is bad for me. And this is exactly what I do with clients. I help you to uncover and get clear, not from me telling you, hey, do this. No, from us going into your inner knowing and learning how your body works so that you know how to make decisions with ease, with true confidence in yourself and trust in yourself, and knowing that's your intuition guiding you. And from there, it's about following it and taking the leap, but nourishing your body through that process. I wish I had a mentor or coach, someone by my side in those times that I was making all the transitions that I did. Not just from moving abroad, but from changing careers, from, when I changed my career from being in corporate to going into yoga and following my passion, to changing relationships, to changing just the way I was showing up. Those transitions are not always easy. And that's exactly why I do what I do, because I wish I had someone at that time. And that's what I'm here to be for you. That's exactly what we work together in my Return to Radiance program. You can find all the details for that below to apply. And it is the best way to work together to overcome stress, burnout, overwhelm, fear, and to create the balance that you really deserve, that you really crave for, without ignoring your success, with already bringing your success into it, keeping that, and then creating your most radiant self around it. If you're someone who is afraid of making a big change, I want you to take these first steps. The first one is to acknowledge yourself. See yourself, even if it's looking in the mirror in your eyes and saying, hey, I see you. I acknowledge you, and I'm proud of you for having the awareness to know what's happening. And then tuning in and nourishing yourself. Nourishing your mind, your body, your spirit, giving yourself what you need. If you don't know what you need, check in. If I was a little girl, if I was a little boy, what would I need to give to myself now? And then pour into you. What decision do I need to make? And what do I need to start saying yes to myself? You are so important. You are so divinely created. You are here for a reason. And you're here to live in balance, to live with your purpose, to live really true to yourself. I am so grateful to have you here. I'm so grateful to just share my story. Thank you so much for listening. And I would love, love, love to hear yours. Add it down in the comments below. What is a moment in your time that you've really trusted yourself, even when it felt scary and uncertain? Or what is an area that you really want to trust yourself now? Claim it. Claim it and write it as an affirmation, even in the comments, like, I am doing this now. And that we give the energy out and we start to move forward in it. Thank you so much, my loves, for being here. I'm so excited to see you in the next one.